Dear Sarah, and all your listeners, my name is Jonathan, and I live in the most perfect Bigfoot location imaginable in the beautiful hills of West Virginia. I live in an extremely idyllic Scandinavian-style post and beam log cabin with my family, which belongs to the owner of this large country estate, where I am fortunate enough to work and reside. Let's just call my employer William Carter for the purposes of my story. I work for William as the head groomsman here, and I'm in charge of 3 other grooms that work under my guidance and supervision with all the horses. My job requires an extensive understanding and knowledge of horses, from the varying breeds and different temperaments. I am expected to be on call both day and night, especially if I'm dealing with a sick or injured horse that may require my special undivided care and attention. As you can imagine, my work involves giving the horses excellent nutrition, proper veterinary care, regular exercise, hoof shodding, grooming, and washing horses. It goes without saying that looking after the horses, including the less desirable jobs like mucking out the stables and cleaning up after the horses, is physically exhausting and demanding. So it is not for the faint-hearted, believe me. You really need to love horses in this kind of work. I can assure you that from a lucrative perspective, my pay package is not that special. But bear in mind, I live in an exquisite, decent-sized cabin with my family completely rent-free, without needing to pay the overhead costs for gas or electricity, etc., etc. I'm also doing my dream kind of work, which is working with horses, which for me, it just doesn't get better than that. My wife Annabelle is one of the grooms working under my charge, and she is an invaluable member of my special team, as well as being an incredibly competent rider. We are very fortunate that we both share the same passion. Our daughter Ruth is homeschooled here on the premises by my wife, who supervises her educational needs. On Williams Carter's land, there are so many magnificent wilderness horse trails, which means sometimes we manage riding excursions for members of the public once or twice a year, which brings in extra income, which is always useful. I love and adore working in this part of the world with its magnificent rolling hills, beautiful valleys, glorious silvery lakes and lily-covered ponds, not to mention all the ubiquitous trees that create the lush areas of natural forest and untouched timber that we have here. There is an abundance of enviable wildlife here that would also make our property an ideal location for hunting enthusiasts, but it's not something we rarely engage in on our land. However, the animals do have predators here, I assure you. I've seen a cougar and some coyotes as well as bears and even a mountain lion on our land before. So I imagine they are doing their bit in culling our deer population. Believe me, we have got some trophy-looking prize back on our land that most hunters would kill for. To wake up to this part of the world every day and breathe in the refreshing, invigorating country air and enjoy the magnificent panoramic views over the valley is for me the ideal life and my idea of heaven. My Bigfoot story happened in 2007, but before I tell you my story, I want to tell you that I knew nothing about the hairy man called Bigfoot. Maybe I'd heard about him somewhere, but if I did, I have no recollection about such a revelation. Quite frankly, if you told me there could be a gorilla man gallivanting around our land, I would have considered the notion highly improbable and extremely unlikely. You see, I've never seen anything obvious on our land that would make me remotely suspicious as to the existence of such a creature. But then again, I knew nothing about what signs to look for when it came to Bigfoot. 2 years prior to my Bigfoot encounter, I do recall evenings when there were no crickets singing and there were no animal sounds in the valley, and I always noticed at those times that my horses I took charge over were usually very distressed. As a groom, this continued to concern me, and I did wonder if a predator was around, but the last thing on my mind was a Bigfoot. I tended to veer towards a cougar or a mountain lion. My wife had spent some time in her youth working with silverback gorillas in the Rwandan jungle, and she told me how extraordinary they were. She said they had the ability to hide so well that even in close proximity to them, they became invisible. So she told me they knew how to blend in with their environment so spectacularly. I gather it's all about survival, learning to become one with your environment, and that primates knew how to do this with effortless ease. It is known as prime cam, which means a primate is camouflaged by its environment. One night my wife called me out of the cozy warm cabin into the stillness of the freezing night. "Listen," she said in an excited whisper. "You hear that whooping sound?" I nodded, wondering why on earth she looked so thrilled. "It sounds like a primate," she said to me in shock. "Who would have thought it out here in the heart of the West Virginia of all places?" "You think a gorilla has got loose?" I asked her in surprise. "I suppose anything is possible," she said. "Remember that case when a tiger owner dropped his dangerous cat into a mountainous ravine somewhere in Tennessee, I think it was? Can you imagine what it must have been like to encounter such a creature on your home turf? It would have freaked me out," she said. I nodded in agreement. I cannot imagine, and I would not want to either, how irresponsible that person must have been to let out a wild animal like that could ravage a human without any difficulty. Suddenly my wife started to make primate calls that she used to do when she was working with silverbacks into the valley to see if she got a response, and I was amazed because she did. I was floored. Something had answered her back. We could hear a very clear return whoop. "How odd," she said, walking back into the cabin. "That was definitely a primate of some kind, but what on earth is it doing out here? And it has to be not too far away," she reflected. I gave the matter no further thought until one night I went to check on my horses in the nearby stables, and they appeared to be exceedingly distressed, and the whinnying noises that they were making were nothing like I'd ever heard before. As I approached the stables, I suddenly felt that I was not alone. Someone was watching me, but who and why? It was the most foreboding feeling I have ever experienced, made worse by the fact that despite the frightened noises coming from the horses, everything else on this night was eerily quiet, and even the crickets had ceased singing their nightly chorus. As I entered the stables, the fear from the horses' anxious energy was palpable, and it got my own heart racing, I do not mind admitting. Something had clearly distressed them. I noticed the mother, who was guarding her foal, looked the most distressed of all the horses. I could see how agitated she was, and I was surprised to see some bloody marks and several long scratch marks on the top of her left hind leg, which were startling to say the least, almost as if some savage animal had clawed her with his sharp talons. I attended to her wounds immediately, that were luckily not deep enough for stitches, but something had clearly scratched her badly. But who or what, I had no idea. I came to the conclusion that a predator of some kind had clearly entered the stables and had its eye on the young foal, which would explain the mother's distress. I considered her wounds may have been caused from protecting her young one from this predator. When you live on a land with so much wildlife, why on earth would a predator come into an area with human habitation, when the valleys below are filled with easy meals, from turkeys to grouse, rabbits, and the list goes on? It was the most bewildering and extremely bizarre. I also hasten to mention that there was this damp, odorous smell in the stables that was pungent and utterly revolting. So I knew that something had been in our stables, and so I put a couple of trail cams on a couple of outside trees in the hope that I could suss out what this mystery predator may be. All was quiet for a few nights, until there was another commotion in the stables, and as I rushed outside the cabin, I caught a glimpse of this red eye shine at least 7 feet off the ground. What in the heck is that, I wondered, rushing towards the stables to attend to my frightened horses. You could be forgiven for thinking it was an owl on a branch, but I assure you there was no branch to perch on there, so those eyes belonged to something tall, something of at least over 7 feet. I immediately checked all my trail cams and was horrified to see that the cameras had been deliberately turned to face in another direction when I had specifically focused them directly on the stables. It was all exceedingly odd, and something intelligent had clearly done this. Fortunately, months passed without any further incidents, I'm glad to say. One day, on one of the horse riding trails, we suddenly saw this dark 8-foot form crossing our path, but it happened so fast that no one could really affirm what we saw. There were arguments about whether it was a bear, but no one believed a bear could run quite so fast and vanish quite so quickly, and one of the riders said she could swear that the thing, whatever it was, had human-like hands. One day I ventured along our horse trail path and checking the area to make sure there were no obstacles on the trail, like thorn bushes and so forth that may need cutting back. You see, the rambling dense thicket in this area is unforgivingly full of barbs and thorns, and I want to make sure that both horses and riders do not succumb to the wrath of those reckless spikes that can literally tear your skin to shreds. Suddenly I felt that foreboding feeling that something and someone was watching me, and my blood went cold like ice. I could literally feel the hairs on my arms standing on end. Why was I reacting like this when there was nothing there? All was very still, in fact alarmingly so. There was pretty bird song in the valley that had ceased, and all seemed incredibly quiet. I could still feel eyes on me, and I instinctively knew it was a predator. I always carry a hunting rifle with me because of the various encounters I've had in the past with wild animals. I looked around and peered through my scope haphazardly, focusing my rifle in all manner of directions. Not being able to see a predator that you know is close by has got to be the most unnerving, terrifying feeling that causes total vulnerability and helplessness. Where do you aim your rifle? That thing could be anywhere and pounce on you when your back is turned. I knew that very well. I knew this well because I knew of a person who was killed by a mountain lion once. And believe me, this thing was so sneaky, it was on top of him before he had a hope in hell of escaping. He didn't even hear it before it mounted him. Suddenly I heard this low guttural warning growl, and it was the most disorientating sound I have ever heard in my entire life, because it literally caused my whole body to tremble, and it just would not stop. I had no physical control over the overwhelming anxiety as it physically coursed through my body at an alarming speed. Even my heartbeat had accelerated, and I heard the fast pumping sounds of its beat racing violently through my chest like a heavy drum. Then there it was, several yards away from me, towards the left-hand side of the valley. A humongous creature stood there with round, almond-shaped dark eyes, staring at me with a look of incandescent rage written over his hairless, primate-looking face. This animal, whatever it was, had no pleasure in my presence. I got the instinct impression that this was his territory and I was not welcome here. What the heck is this creature, I wondered. I'd never seen anything like it before. The creature was 8 foot tall and 800 pounds easily, and it was covered with dark auburn brown hair that was quite thick apart from his face and knee pads. The arms were long, just like a silverback's, only exceedingly muscular. I imagined this creature could stand erect and easily touch his ankles without bending over, and I'm almost certain that although the creature was bipedal, it could run on all fours with effortless ease. In my opinion, the term ape man would have been the perfect analogy to describe this formidable foe, because he had aspects of a human and aspects of an ape in his appearance. The creature had that typical cone-shaped head, muscular rounded shoulders, and a very wide torso and chest area. His huge legs were muscular and strong. Indeed, this creature exuded power, strength, and agility in every area of his body. As for that face, I will never forget it for as long as I live. Especially the furious eyes, the furrowed head, thin lips, and very flat, squashed nose. The creature was thumping his chest furiously, and I knew that was a sign of anger and aggression, and I knew I was in trouble. If a silverback gorilla is equivalent to 4 males in strength, what on earth would this thing do to me at 800 pounds in weight? All I can say is that I was horrified as I began to realize I might not be leaving this place alive. I had haunting visions of my body ripped apart, torn into shreds like a broken doll, lying splattered all over the wilderness, only to be devoured by the coyotes, eager to dine over my leftovers. Then there would be nothing left of me, and I would be listing as one of the many that go missing every year in North America. The creature started to mock charge me, and I just froze to the spot. And all I could do was try and remember what my wife had told me about silverbacks. She had said, bend down, avert your gaze, don't look at the creature, and show that you're absolutely no threat. Be very submissive. So that is exactly what I did. I mean, what did I have to lose? I was going to die anyway, but why not die fighting to survive? And if making yourself small worked with silverbacks, maybe it would work with this god-awful thing also. Whatever it was, maybe there was a small gleam of hope, I thought. You're probably wondering why I did not use my rifle on this creature, and the answer might surprise you. I really felt that if I had used my rifle, I would have been dead before I pulled the trigger. I think I knew the better word to use is, yes, I knew I would be dead if I touched the trigger. That certainly is in my mind. This creature reacts so fast, and I believe it knew what my rifle was. It was exceedingly intelligent. Just as I assume it was the one that had turned my trail cams the other way, it also knew what those trail cams were. So it possibly knew what this was too. The creature was sharp, intelligent, and instinctive. As the creature continued to exert his anger towards me by shaking his fists, thumping his chest, and releasing a throaty growl that was so terrifying it literally put the fear of God throughout my whole body. I threw my rifle to the ground, averted my gaze from the creature, and made myself as small as possible so that I looked like a large ball on the ground. I followed my wife's advice to the letter. I saw the hairy man touch my back briefly with a light pressure using the back of his foot. Then I heard him grunt and snort as if satisfied, and I could tell the creature seemed to have calmed down immensely. And then, much to my amazement, he just walked away, just like that. OMG, it worked, I thought. Never had I been more grateful that my wife had worked with silverback. Her advice may have just saved me my life. When I returned to the cabin, my wife was horrified to see me in such a dreadful state. I promise you the post-traumatic trauma I experienced after the event was almost worse than the encounter itself. Just a mere memory of the encounter made me break out in hives and have panic attacks. Once I'd done some research, I was amazed to find that I'd encountered a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. My wife believes that he is real because of the primate calls that she heard on our land when she called out. She also believes that the reason people do not see them is because, like other primates, like the silverback she knew in Rwanda, Bigfoot knows how to be invisible in plain sight. My wife gave me the best advice, and that is to leave well alone. Let him have that area, she told me. He was angry with you because he was being territorial, and he would have fought you to the death if he thought you were a threat. So that is what I've done. I've changed the riding trails so that they don't border on the northwest side of the land, and that is fine by me. It will be too soon if I ever see that Bigfoot again. It would be nothing for him to have killed me in an instant. He knew it, and I knew it too. I am stunned to have encountered a creature like this. Some may describe it as a privilege, but for me it was an encounter I would have paid big bucks to avoid. Even now I suffer post-traumatic stress and am receiving counseling which has helped me a lot. If you are in any doubt about the hairy man, believe me, he is very real because I've seen him myself. And I assure you, as creative as I may be, I would never be able to make this stuff up. Thank you so very much for that incredible story. I love the way you describe what it's like to be a groomsman and what it was like working on the land and the strange encounters that you had and the red eye shine, and the way that you copied the silverback in literally becoming very submissive to the creature, and that appeared to work. And I think that could be one of the explanations why Bigfoot is so invisible to so many of us, and that even though we may hear the whooping sounds, we look around and we can't see Bigfoot, because he knows how to blend in with his environment, that even if he's right in front of us, he'll appear invisible. So that was the most fantastic story, which I hope everyone enjoyed as much as I did. Love to all of you in North America and the rest of the world. Until next time, goodbye and good night.